Hi, and welcome to my channel where I make dishes inspired by some of my favorite video game characters. Today's dish is inspired by Verso from Clair Obscur Expedition 33. There's so much I can talk about with Expedition 33 in general, and one thing for certain is that the characters are beautifully written. The characters are so incredibly nuanced, and you can meet so many different people and they'll all have different favorite characters from the game. For me, Verso is definitely one of the standouts. As soon as you meet him, there's so much mystery surrounding him and who he could be, why he's older, and why does he know so much. Of course, the party first meeting Verso is a very tense time for not only the party, but for the player. I loved getting to learn not only about his history, but his personality and his relationships with characters like Monoko, Eskie, Mael, Lune, and Ciel. He's so strong and capable, but hides such pain deep within. It would truly be so horrible to be invincible and get to know so many amazing groups of people that never survive, to start building hope only for it to be squashed along with all of their lives. I couldn't imagine that pain, and I also couldn't imagine the pain of hiding all of the secrets and knowledge he holds within, and the guilt of knowing that a lot of what is happening is, in a way, his fault. In battle, I always felt that his attacks were so cool and flashy, and he was my strongest character for the longest time. That is, until Mael got her Gommage gradient skill. All in all, Verso is an incredibly impactful character that I won't forget anytime soon. When thinking of a dish for Verso, I definitely wanted to make a delicious savory French meal, considering the game's development team is mostly from France. I feel like Verso would really like a flavor-packed classic dish that could be enjoyed by all. I get the feeling that he'd gravitate towards meaty foods and would just really be a sucker for a well-cooked, juicy steak. We also know that he really appreciates a fine bottle of wine, as evidenced by literally filling Eskie with wine, so I wanted to incorporate this somehow. Lastly, I wanted a portion of the dish to be slightly childish in nature, since the version of Verso that we see within the canvas is a younger, boyish version of himself. All in all, I ended up deciding on some steak frites with a red wine sauce that was absolutely incredible and will have you muttering,
"Good stuff,"
as you take a bite. Here's what you'll need to make your own. For the steak frites itself, you'll need 4 russet potatoes, 2 ribeye steaks, coarse salt, black pepper, canola oil for frying, and parsley. For the red wine sauce, you'll need garlic, 1 shallot, dry red wines such as Zinfandel or Cabernet, fresh rosemary, fresh thyme, beef stock, unsalted butter, and I forgot to picture it here, but you'll also need balsamic vinegar. The process is a little bit tricky at times, as it starts off with a lot of prep and waiting and ends with a lot of multitasking, but it's nothing that Expedition 33 couldn't handle. To start, we'll prep the potatoes. Grab 4 russet potatoes and then wash and peel them. Once peeled, you'll cut the potatoes to your desired thickness for fries, and then you'll place them into a large bowl filled with ice water. Or you could do it like me and add water and ice afterwards. You'll soak the potatoes in the ice water for at least 2 hours or even overnight, as soaking in the cold water can help make the fries cook more evenly and become more crispy. You can set the bowl of water in the fridge to stay cool, or you can leave it at room temperature, but just make sure that there's still some ice inside and it hasn't all melted. Go ahead and use this time, these at least 2 hours, doing whatever you'd like playing a beautiful piano solo. About 2 hours later, and about 1 hour before you're ready to start eating, we'll start brining our steaks. Grab a baking sheet and line it with parchment paper, then place a wire rack or cooling rack directly on top. Grab your ribeye steaks from the fridge and place them on top of this rack and sprinkle a generous amount of salt on each side of your steak. As you see what I'm doing here, I need to be completely transparent and say that I am nowhere near experienced in cooking steak. I don't cook it very often since it's so expensive, and it had been a good year since I had made some. First off, I was using regular fine salt, but when brining steak, it's actually recommended to use coarse salt, so I updated the recipe to reflect this. Now, because I was using fine salt, and I'm also inexperienced, I definitely added way too much salt to my steak here. You do indeed want a good amount of coarse salt on your steak, but definitely not this much. Are you prepared to see how much I overdid it? Okay, here's what it should actually look like. Can you see how I almost put my family in a hypertensive crisis with all of the salt I added? It's all right though. I made this mistake so that those who come after do not. So yes, you want to salt your steak until it looks more like this lovely example, not like my steak. Once you've correctly brined your ribeye, unlike me, You'll place the baking sheet into the fridge to rest, uncovered, for 1 hour. Pretty much immediately after your steaks go into the fridge, you'll start getting your frying station ready for your fries. Pour some canola oil into a deep fryer or a large pot, then start heating it up to 275 degrees Fahrenheit. Also, I don't think I've mentioned this before, but I have a super convenient deep fryer that strains out all of the oil for you after each use, and it makes frying so much less of a pain, which makes me more likely to fry when I would have used to think, nah, it's too much of a hassle to fry today. You'll wait until your oil reaches temperature, and then you can pull the potatoes out of the water bowl and pat them dry with paper towels or a towel. You'll fry in batches that are about 1 handful large each for around 5 to 6 minutes. You're going to end up doing a double fry, so don't expect the fries to come out perfectly crispy and golden brown here. You're only looking to see that the fries are softer and more cooked through. As the first batch is frying, grab a baking sheet and line it with parchment paper and then a layer of paper towels. Once each batch of potatoes is done frying, you'll remove the fries from the fryer and place them onto these paper towels. Repeat with each batch until all batches are cooked and on the paper towels, and then you'll place the whole baking sheet into the freezer to rest for around 30 to 45 minutes. As I said earlier, you're doing a double fry here, so you don't need to clean up your frying station yet. You can turn off the fryer to save some energy, but you shouldn't clean up the oil since you're going to use it later. While we have a few minutes, it's a good idea to do a smidgen more prep at the cutting board. You'll grab at least 4 cloves of garlic and peel and mince them and place them into a small bowl. You'll also grab a shallot and peel and mince it as well, then add to the same small bowl and set aside until later. Around this time, it should hopefully be around an hour since the steak went into the fridge to brine, so at this point you can take your steak out of the fridge to start allowing it to come closer to room temperature. As the steaks come out, you'll also place a cast iron or large skillet on your stovetop and start heating it on high. You want to pat the steaks dry of any excess liquid they've accumulated, and you'll also brush off any excess salt, which I obviously did not do enough of. The last thing you'll do is season the steak with some black pepper, then head back over to your stovetop. With your cast iron or large skillet surface now hot, you'll drizzle the surface with a little bit of olive oil, then place your steak down and sear for at least 3 minutes per side. The cooking time will vary widely based on the size of your steak, as my steaks were pretty large, so I had to cook a lot longer. If you're going for a medium rare cook, the internal temperature should be around 130 to 135 degrees Fahrenheit, but of course, you can cook more or less depending on your own preferences. Once your steaks reach your desired temperature, you'll remove the steaks off of the skillet and allow the steaks to rest for at least 10 minutes before you slice and serve. Now, we can't really think about serving yet, though, because we still have a bit to do. Although it won't take a long amount of time, it will feel a bit like you're in a little whirlwind in the kitchen. You'll head back to your frying station and start heating it to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. The oil will likely still be quite warm from earlier, so it shouldn't take too long to reach this new temperature. As the oil heats up again, we'll start making the red wine sauce. In your cast iron pan or large skillet, you'll reduce the heat to medium and allow the temperature of the surface to start coming down. You don't need to clean up the pan, as some of the steak drippings will add a little bit of flavor, but if some of the bits are a bit too charred or even blackened like mine, feel free to remove them. As the late Anne Burrell famously said, brown food tastes good. But unfortunately, also burnt food does not. Once the temperature of the skillet has come down, you'll add in your bowl of minced garlic and shallot, and if the surface has become slightly too dry, you'll add in a drizzle of olive oil. You'll sauté and stir these aromatics frequently for about 1 minute. Then you'll add in some good stuff. You'll pour in 1 cup of your red wine of choice, 1 tablespoon of balsamic vinegar, 1 sprig of rosemary, and 2 sprigs of thyme. Keep heating the mixture, stirring occasionally until it starts to simmer and slightly bubble. When the sauce is simmering, you'll keep heating and stirring occasionally for about 3 to 5 more minutes until the sauce is reduced and thickens slightly, and then you can add in 1 cup of beef stock. At this point, we'll increase the heat to high and cook for another 4 to 5 minutes, again stirring occasionally until the sauce has reduced a little bit more. We can then carefully remove the sprigs of rosemary and thyme, and then add in 1 tablespoon of unsalted butter. As the butter melts into the sauce, quickly taste and season more if needed. Now, the whole time the sauce has been cooking and your steak has been resting, your frying station should come up to that 375-degree temperature. When it's to temperature, we can do our final fry of the fries, which is pretty much the last hard thing we'll have to do. All you'll do for the second fry is toss another handful of your frozen potatoes into the fryer and cook for around 3 minutes. This should cause them to come out a beautiful golden brown, and as you remove them from the fryer, you'll place them onto a plate lined with paper towels. Shortly after removing the fries from the fryer, you'll also want to sprinkle them with a little bit of salt and parsley. As I said, that's really the last hurdle for the expedition, and from here, we can prepare to serve.
Let's carve a
Steak. Grab your rested steak and slice into thinner, more manageable pieces. Once the steak is sliced, place the steak onto a plate alongside your finished fries. The last step is to drizzle the red wine sauce generously over the steak, then enjoy. So I'm not gonna lie, for the missed steaks I've already mentioned, my steaks were way too salty and hard to eat flavor-wise. The potential was insane though, because the steak itself was so tender and juicy, and I could definitely tell if I just wouldn't have been so excited with the salt, it would have been a huge hit. The fries themselves are so perfectly golden and crisp, and they're great by themselves or with any dipping sauce of your choice. Speaking of sauce, the red wine sauce has this richness to it that I feel like only wine can provide. Although the steaks are plenty juicy, the sauce seeps into all nooks and crannies and brings so much more depth to each bite. I sure was kicking myself for my seasoning mistakes, but overall, I could see the immense enjoyment I would have had eating this dish if it were just properly salted. Renoir and Aline are obviously very fancy and well-off individuals, so when they would go out as a family, it was often to fancy French restaurants rather than quick fast food or more traditional family restaurants. As a child, Verso was a huge fan of fries, like all children are, and he couldn't deny how much he loved meat and steak. His parents felt that as he got older, his palate should continue to grow like his body, and he should want to order more mature dishes, but anywhere they went, he would order steak frites, and he would totally be the kind to dunk his steak and fries in a heaping bowl of ranch. He'd be having the time of his life digging in, and Renoir and Aline would go red as a tomato reaching over to wipe his face or scolding him for his lack of decorum. Although they hoped he would grow into more refined and mature tastes, he never did, and always opted for steak frites. After the real Verso passed, Renoir and Aline would grow to hate the thought of steak frites, as it would remind them of how their son was never coming back. They used to get annoyed with his choice, and they would get annoyed with how messy he'd get, but now they wish more than anything that he could be here at all to get messy again. Time would pass in the canvas, and Painted Verso would eventually stumble upon an extremely hidden secret island full of chefs who would cater to his every desire, whether it was making more steak frites or creme brulee. Painted Verso would feel warm in his chest every time he'd visit, but he made sure to keep the location a complete secret from not only his parents and Alicia, but even Monoko and Noko. Of course, Esquier would eventually become a bit of a storage vault for red wine, but he'd actually have a hidden, super secret storage area for a bucket of fries and steak that would be their little secret. The recipe card is in the video description if you'd like a more quick and concise version to give it a try. Like if you want a bite, subscribe for more geeky treats, and comment what foods Verso reminds you of. Thanks for following along.